before, I think I was allowing all of this like noise I was consuming to determine what success should be for me. When
Mm-hmm.
at the core, and I chased it for a long time, and I achieved some of it. And I always wondered, why do I not feel like I'd hit this goal and I wouldn't feel fulfilled?
Hello and welcome to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. My name is Maggie, aka your business bestie. I teach female coaches, speakers, and course creators to release procrastination and perfection so that they can get more done, book more clients, and have the time freedom that all entrepreneurs crave. This is not your typical business coaching podcast. We're talking about business, life, probably some wooey magic, and probably some singing or referencing song lyrics along the way. So if you're into business building, making more money, and getting a little bit of a mindset shift along with having a good laugh, you're definitely in the right place. I've grown 3 businesses from $0 to consistent 4 and 5 figure months over the last 15 plus years. And now I'm helping you do the same thing. It didn't happen overnight, and it certainly didn't happen without the help of others. They say it takes a village to raise children, and I believe it takes a village to grow a business as well. So in this podcast, you'll find people who help you grow your village, cheer you on, as well as holding you accountable. I'm so excited you're here, and I can't wait for you to listen to each episode. Let's dive in. All right, everyone, welcome back to the Chaos to Clarity podcast. Today, I have Nikki Schneider on with me. I'm so excited to have her on here and just excited to reconnect with her and hear all about her new adventures. So, Nikki, I would love for you to give us an introduction, who you are, who you serve, what you've been up to, and all that good stuff.
Awesome. That's like very general. So if you need to stop me because you're the other question is coming that'll cover it, I could just go on and on. But yeah, I really appreciate you having me on, Maggie. This is gonna be super fun, just reconnecting and giving me the opportunity to share kind of what I've been up to because it's completely different from maybe what I had been doing. So I'll try to summarize in the fact that I live in Wisconsin, very, very, very small town. Technically Plymouth, but it's actually Mitchell. We live in the middle of the woods, kind of like Snow White, but no dwarfs. We have 2 alpacas, a dog, a bunny. We used to have a bearded dragon, but that recently passed. And we just think that we are amateur alpaca ranchers. It's kind of fun.
I love it.
We have no idea what we're doing, and it's fun. I've been married to my husband, Adam, for almost 16 years, right? Yep, almost 16 years. We have a freshly 15-year-old son named Isaac, 12-year-old daughter named Isla, and we homeschool. So that is family life. I'm originally from Michigan. My background is in interior design and architecture, and now I'm a writer because those 2 things, go together and lead to one another. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about. Just, the journey from what does that look like as a girl with big dreams of living in a big city and being an architect to living quite literally in the middle of nowhere, writing and prefer to not live in a city. And what is all that chunk of time that happened in between there? That I think that's what we're here to talk about.
Yeah, for sure. I love that so much. I definitely have aspirations for us to be homesteaders. So I know that is coming. And like we live in the middle of nowhere as well. So like it's the stepping stone to the next thing. So I can
Yeah.
totally relate to that. I think that's so awesome. But also, just the journey from where you were to where you are now, and then just kind of looking back at some of that to say, wow, that turned out different, right? In the best of ways,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
know there are times where I think like, man, I did not necessarily see my life this way, in a good way, right? Like it's always amazing to me, like how life actually works out once you're like to a point and you're like, oh wow, this is different, but it's
Yeah.
really good.
Yeah, yeah. I had that moment this morning, like shoveling alpaca manure. I was like, this is not what I expected, but I don't mind it at the same time. So, yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where, like, whenever, I will admit that the alpacas were not my idea. We make our own maple syrup. That was not my idea. We heat our home with wood, not my idea. Like, all these things are like dreams of my husband and the kids, but it's fun to just when you kind of let go and say like, okay, like this isn't about me. This is like their passions, kind of like what you learn and how it changes you and you become so much more happy when you let other people kind of in, and saying yes to what they want too. So that's
Right.
all part of the journey as well.
Yeah. Well, and your personal growth, right? Like knowing
Yes.
that, like, oh, I can start my own fire, or like I know how to make maple syrup. Like those are not things that most people know how to do, right? Like
Yeah.
I know how to start a fire, but I I also grew up on a farm. So like there are things
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
like there are things that I know how to do that other people look at me and they're like, "What?" Like I know how to
Yeah.
drive a tractor, right? And I've had people who I know in the coaching area in the coaching industry say, "You know how to drive a tractor?" And I was like, "Yeah, like the big ones that are out in the field that like they
That's
like
so cool.
cut the things down." They're
Yeah.
like, people will look at me like, "Oh,
I think it's cool.
wow."
Add it to the resume.
Right? I know. Add it to the list of things that like, yeah, I can totally do that. Why can't you?
Mhm. Yep. Real life
Oh,
experience.
yes. So tell me, what is something challenging that you have overcome in your business, which I know is a super vague question. But just what is something that you just navigated again, like went through the chaos to find the clarity?
Yeah, I mean, it's very clear to me like what I should be talking about today. So I'm gonna rewind. About 9 years ago, I became a health and fitness coach, and that was my realm and my bread and butter. And I do still coach. I do still coach the women that not only said yes to me to get healthier, but also I mentor the women on my team as well. But that was my sole purpose. And what's interesting is I shouldn't say sole purpose. Obviously, wife and mother always takes precedent, right? That's always number one. But it's interesting because I said yes to coaching because I had found a way to eat healthier and I had found a way to get my family at the table almost every night. And I wanted to share that with more people. That's actually why I said yes to coaching, because like the nutrition part is such a big piece of just being healthy. But along that journey, I totally got lost in the sauce of coaching and I forgot like the passionate piece of it that led me to coach in the first place. So I had this dream of, like that's why I said yes to coaching. Like I just really wanted to get people back to the dinner table. Like there's so much going on in our world. And I feel like, I'm not naive enough to think that a family meal will solve all the world's problems, but I do think that a strong family unit is a really good start. I had this reason of why I wanted to help people live healthier. But then as the years went on, I had this dream to write a cookbook. And as I'm kind of getting lost in the coaching world, and not in a bad way whatsoever. I mean, it changed my life, but I kind of forgot like why I said yes in the first place. I think that sometimes you enter something, you have like this fire and this passion behind it. And then all of a sudden you take maybe like I don't want to say a wrong turn, but just a turn that maybe wasn't meant for you.
Mm-hmm.
And then you kind of forget about what was meant for you. So that's where I was for a really long time. And then fast forward a lot of years, a lot of success as well to 2021. And I was hosting an event at a farm nearby. We have like a yearly summit for health and fitness coaches, and I was hosting it that year, just here close to my hometown. So I was hosting this event, and we had a jump rope class, which was super fun. But fluke accident happened. I went to jump in on a double Dutch jump rope because I'm a child, and I landed wrong and everything changed. I landed wrong and I tore my ACL meniscus. Didn't think that's what I did, but I did. And it was almost like that 2x4 to the back of the knees, quite literally, that God was like, you are on a different path than what was meant for you. Not saying that coaching wouldn't be a part of my life, but like, hey, you forgot about this dream. You had this passion. Let me just, allow this to happen, to sit you down. And that's quite literally what it did. And I'm going to fast forward quite a bit, or summarize, I should say, but that injury happened. For, reasons unknown. I really got put off in the healthcare system, and that I just couldn't get an appointment. I couldn't get in to get seen. Didn't know it was ACL tear. I was on crutches for 6 weeks, still not knowing what was going on.
Oh my gosh.
My upper body was really strong
right
by that time, but that was a really long time to not know what was going on. And thankfully, my friend Beth, I shouldn't say thankfully, but her husband had the same exact injury. And the thankfully piece is that she had said, hey, if you have calf pain that feels like a Charlie horse that doesn't go away, you should call that could be a blood clot, because that happened to her husband. And I was like, well, I do. So it turns out I did have a blood clot in my leg, and that blood clot broke apart and went into my lungs, and all of a sudden became life-threatening.
Right.
So that was terrifying. And I think that when something life-threatening happens to you, that clarity piece that you always talk about, that is like, what have I been doing?
Right.
I have this dream that's been put on my heart, and I'm just ignoring it. I'm not doing anything with it. So, in the midst of this, like, injury turned life-threatening, turned an insane thing that I never wanted to happen, but it brought so much good. So I have to be grateful for it. But in the midst of that, my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's. My brother was battling addiction. He's clean now, thankfully. My husband's brother's cancer came back. It was just like all of this stuff, just like everything felt chaotic. We were homeschooling. That was our first full year homeschooling? I believe it was. So there was just like a lot. There was just a lot to navigate. A lot of heaviness, a lot of like, what is the point of all of this, but it really became clear to me that all of that was being allowed in my life to remind me to slow down and remember who I was.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what brought about, like, okay, like, I'm not going to stop coaching necessarily, because I love the women that I work with so much, but my priority had to shift and make this dream happen. Otherwise, I would always regret it. Like, what would the 85-year-old Nikki say? She'd probably be like, let me get another 2x4 and slap your other knee around because you never followed that dream,
Right. Yeah. Wow. What a way to really kind of test your core values, right? Those passions and core values, those like deep-seated needs of like, okay, why am I doing this? Right? Like, that's a lot to be, right? To be handed on a silver platter, to be like, here you go. Here, how will you, right? What are you going to do about it? And I think that, just knowing that bringing things back to home, right? Like back to you, back to your family, to really kind of pause and take a breath, to be like, okay, how can we be as strong as possible? Like our home unit, yourself, right? To then be able to allow that space for the rest of all the things that are happening.
Yeah, exactly. So it was very chaotic, to say the least, but it also ended up being a really like good growth time for me. Like it tested not only like, where am I spending my time? What have I been saying no to because I've been saying yes to something different? How, and I'm sure we'll talk about this later, like the social media piece, like that was a big like question mark, how I've been spending my time. Like, man, like time is not, it's finite, and how we spend, like, we don't, like, if you think about it, we don't even get the last hour back. Like, we don't get to redo whatever we did in the hour past, Right. So when you really start to think about it that way, and you really look at the gifts that God has given you, and you're like, man, I'm wasting these. And that's
right?
really what drove me. So, I had all these things, a lot of prayer, a lot of reading, between the Bible and a lot of Bible studies, and then the book, The Obstacle is the Way, like those things, like as I'm dealing with like this blood clot in my lungs, like is it going to go away, like what is going to happen, so like not sleeping really. um
Yeah.
but that was like a big growth period for me. And then when I did finally have my ACL reconstruction and meniscus repair in it was February 11th of 2022. When I did finally have that done, I wrote most of my book while I was recovering. I waited until like I didn't have to have any like crazy meds anymore.
Right.
Because that was like a legit surgery. I did not expect it. I handle pain very well, and that was pretty bad, but which was unexpected. But once I was off of those medications, I wrote, like I had some recipes written, like I had been kind of dabbling with it, like what do I want this to look like? What do I want this to be? But then I really wrote a big chunk of it in like those couple months that I was on the couch recovering.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. And, when you think about time and how you spend your time, right? Time is our most valuable asset, especially as an entrepreneur, right? Because when you're first starting out, all you have is your time, right? You might not have the financial resources, but you've got your time, and how you spend that time and where you spend it, right? If you're spending it on your phone scrolling, seeing what the neighbors are doing or the people that you admire are doing, you're wasting valuable time you could be using to further grow yourself, right? Like, not that learning isn't important, because it very much is, but like, how can you like essentially spread your time out in a way where you're not constantly having a device in your face, right? How can you really manage your time well?
Yeah. My friends Kim and Jason Katecki, he is an artist and a professional speaker who's living in our area. He's amazing. You could Google or go on YouTube and search his TED Talk, but he's really great. And he just put out this really beautiful calendar, full of his own art, and it's amazing. But I'm going to paraphrase what he says, but there's one quote in there that talks about how like video games. So like video games, I'm a child of the 80s. I played a lot of Mario Brothers, Atari, the whole
Yep.
thing. You always get like more lives, right?
Yeah.
But that's not like reality. So like, do you want to spend your life watching someone else's life?
Mm-hmm.
Like we don't get a redo. So I really felt like, man, I'm spending so much time watching other people live their lives when I could be living mine and
Mm-hmm.
living out this dream that I feel like I've been created for, and also like being, more present with my kids. And I know everybody feels that way, right? And you don't need like a life-threatening thing like I apparently did to put me back like on the right track, like just like really evaluating, like I keep saying like, sorry, really evaluating, where have I been investing my time, and is this where I want my life to go?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's a powerful question, right? I've asked some of my coaching clients, right? My business coaching clients, when they come to me and they say, I have no time for anything. It's all, I don't know what to do. Nothing is converting. I'm not making money, and one of the first questions I ask them is, okay, tell me about your day. Tell me about your
Mhm.
day, your week. What do you do? What do you do with your time?
Mhm.
And, like, where are you spending all of your time? What are you doing? Do you spend an hour every night scrolling Instagram, when maybe that hour could be used to create content instead?
Yeah.
Or, are you just angry at the world for not serving you whatever success looks like to you?
Yeah.
Those are some things that, and I think as women, we're really hard on ourselves, right? Because the thing's not working instantly and it should be working and this and that, instead of like stopping to take a breath and just allowing the growth to happen without worrying about all the noise coming at you of like, well, why isn't it working? You've been doing this for this long. So
Yeah.
and so is blah, blah, blah. And really just like coming back to like what it is in your core that is like leading you to do that thing that you're passionate about.
Yeah. And also not letting other people define your success. And I think that's where social media comes into, like, my definition of success from maybe 2, 3 years ago is completely different from my definition of success now. Like my definition of success is having a connected family where we have more time together and my kids want to stay in the faith as they get older. Like that is my definition of success. For before, I think I was allowing all of this like noise I was consuming to determine what success should be for me. When
Mm-hmm.
at the core, and I chased it for a long time and I achieved some of it. And I always wondered, why do I not feel like I'd hit this goal and I wouldn't feel fulfilled? And
Mm-hmm.
I'd ask myself, why do I not feel fulfilled? I hit this goal like that I've been working towards, and everybody's so excited, and I'm excited, but I'm like, okay, what's next?
Right.
So to me, that was a very, not only just my personality type, like I really need to work on slowing down and enjoying the moment, but also probably because I was working for the wrong type of success for me,
Mm-hmm.
because I was letting other people determine. So I think a really great question to ask yourself would be, for all the listeners, what is your definition of success? And it doesn't have to be what you see on social media. It doesn't have to be, if you're in coaching, it doesn't have to be what Maggie's doing. If you're in health and fitness, it doesn't have to be what maybe I once did. What is your definition? And that's the biggest thing that I think women, especially, and men too, man. Like I think that, everybody thinks that it's easier for men, but it's really not. They have just as many emotional questions as we do.
Right.
They're perceived differently, but asking yourself those questions without letting someone else determine that for you is going to be really a game changer.
Yeah, absolutely. Mid last year, I connected with, someone on Facebook, and we did a coaching exchange, and that conversation was so powerful because he asked me, he said, well, what are your core values? And I rattled off some like, like my kids and like nothing about me, right? And he was like, yeah, but what does that give you, right? Like what do you feel when you accomplish this stuff, right? What is success for you? And after a very humbling conversation for me, I was like, oh, I am, similar to you, like I was in business for the right reasons, but I definitely took a moment to realign, right? Like I wasn't feeling joy. I wasn't feeling creative. And when I took the time to really understand, like, okay, what brings me joy in doing this? What makes me feel creative? What helps me feel like I am contributing, like I'm contributing to our sustainability as a family? That really helped me shift what I was doing in business to be more aligned and I guess come from a place of coaching from a better, more aligned space, right? To
Mm-hmm.
lead with a more aligned thought process rather than just like, oh, I'm doing this because I need 3 clients this month or because I want 2 clients or I need to make this much money. It was no longer about that. And that shifted so much in my business.
Yeah, and that's so beautiful. I think when we can find what our definition of success is and what brings us joy, and infusing that with your core values, like the success is going to come when you're living who you're truly meant to be. Like
Right.
that's just going to come as a natural byproduct. It's and that sounds so easy for me to say, but it's like all the hard work behind the scenes they have to do to get to that point. That's the hard stuff,
Mm-hmm.
messy stuff, and it can't be something that happens overnight. And I hope that it doesn't have to be something that like what happened to me, where you're bedridden.
Right.
And I'm terrified, if I can add that as well. But it doesn't have to be that way. But really just asking yourself those tough questions is going to help you find that clarity that you're seeking.
Yeah. Well, and I think once you understand what success means to you, what it feels like, what your core values are, it makes saying yes and saying no a
Mhm.
lot easier, right?
Yeah.
Because then you basically ask yourself, okay, is this going to bring me joy and creativeness and whatever else that list is? If that's a yes, okay, then I know I need to lean into that. If it's kind of like a
Mhm.
maybe, at least for me, if things are a maybe, they're a no, right? If I'm kind of like, I got to think about it, it's a no. And
Yeah.
I've started adopting that, and I am more and more surprised at like how much more fulfilled I feel when
Mhm.
I, like, just is this what I need today, right? And it's just amazing how it feels so much different, and how I feel so much more in control of my life, right? Of my business, of like my home, right? My relationships.
Yeah.
It's just really amazing.
Yeah. And I think, if you're listening to this and you're thinking like, okay, that all sounds good. I don't know how to do that.
Right.
My my best suggestion for you would be to unplug from all social media for at least 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Because what that at least, I mean, that is like probably the minimum. And but what that does, and what that did for me, and you don't have to go as crazy. I shouldn't say crazy. I feel very joyful without social media, but you don't have to go the opposite, the complete other end of the spectrum and just be done with it completely. And we'll maybe get into that. I'm kind of jumping the horse here, but um jumping the horse. That's not a thing, but you know what I mean. It is now. It's a thing. But giving yourself that break of like not consuming is kind of like it's like a detox. Like you get to detox your brain from all the things you've been consuming, all the things you've been told, all the things you've been watching, all the success stories that aren't happening for you. Like it just detoxes all of that. And then you're kind of at that ground zero. And again, 2 weeks just sounds like not enough time, but like at least, give yourself that minimum depending on how you use it for business or whatever it is. But what that ground zero is going to do is, okay, how can I build myself back up from here? What is my true north? What is my one true north? What
Mm-hmm.
is that? And that's going to be maybe different for everybody. And then, what are your like maybe your top 5 values, maybe your top 3 as an individual, and what are your top 10 as a family? Like
Mm-hmm.
those should be your guiding line, your guiding lights for everything you're saying yes to and everything that drives your business. That would be my best suggestion. I always like when I listen to a podcast, I want like a tangible, okay, what do I do? Give yourself a social media detox if you
Mm-hmm.
need to find that clarity.
Right. Yeah. And if you need some accountability, like, don't be afraid
Yes.
to reach out to somebody, right? Like, a social, to me, 2 weeks off of social media has me feeling a little like, oh, I had a little too much coffee today. But I also know, like, even as you're talking, thinking about, okay, yeah, how do I use social media? How can I
Mhm.
scroll less? And I know that the less I scroll, the more creative I am, and the more like things I want to,
Yeah.
like, infuse into either the podcast or emails or, current clients or even social media posts, because I think you can still create and not consume as
Yeah.
much, right? I follow a number of people who on their social media, like, they create, but they follow very few people, so that when they go on to social media, the like the scroll, it is just, it's like not there, right? Because there's only like a handful of people that they're following, and they just don't want to scroll anymore. So
Yeah.
I think that is also important as you're navigating through that, like, okay, how much time am I spending on social media? A couple years ago, I have an iPhone, and a couple years ago, one of the features that came with the new iPhone was like a how it's it like tracks your time, like where
Yeah.
you're spending your time on your phone.
Mhm.
And when that first popped up, I was like, oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
that's a lot of time, right? And it was one of those things where it was like, oh, I've got 5 minutes. I'm just gonna, scroll on social media, whatever. But those 5 minutes add up so
They
much.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
they do add up. I had a moment and I'll embarrass myself by telling you this, but I think it's worth it and important. But I have an Android because I'm 90, but like I'm a child when I'm jumping in on a jump rope, and I'm 90 when it comes to my phone. But um I have an Android and it tells you like at the end of the week how much more time or less time you've spent on your phone.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I cut out social media, it kind of started in December, I think, initially to just kind of prepare my heart for Christmas and all that. Um, there was one like after the first week, it was like you spent 3 hours and 45 minutes less on your phone. And I was like, It's almost 4 hours. Like it was such a wake up call. And like as a parent too, man, like I I don't want my children, they have gab phones. So if you're
Yeah.
a parent searching for a phone for your child that you don't want them to have access to internet, Gab, GABB. Not affiliated with them at all, but that's just what we use. But anyway, eventually they will have, a tiny computer in their pockets, and they're learning their habits from me. So that was like, oh my gosh, I
Mm-hmm.
spent course less time on my phone because I gave up social media. So kind of since we're on that track, and you're probably wondering like, so you're not on social. I built a successful business using social media as a pillar. But what I came to realize in this whole journey of just finding clarity and like, what is the point of all of this stuff being thrown at me, starting with the ACL injury? It was really just trying to figure out, is social media something that makes me happy?
Mm-hmm.
And I noticed that I would compare myself, and that's work that I obviously need to do on my own because no one's putting something out there to look better than
Right.
others,
Yeah.
right? I want to put this out there. I know a lot of people are doing a lot of good work and putting a lot of good into the world using their social media. Want to
Right.
put that out there. This is not like a cut on anyone who's using it, but for me, it was stealing my joy. It was stealing my time. I would compare myself. I felt like I should use it, which I don't like. um, but the other piece too that I realized, like, I don't own anything
Mm-hmm.
that I'm putting out here. So if I want to build something with a solid foundation, but if something were to happen where all of a sudden my accounts were gone, what would I do?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a question that I just couldn't reconcile. So, after this break of social media to just kind of find my own creativity again, that's definitely another thing that it stole for me. And again, at no one's fault. It's because of my own habits. But I realized like I'm creative again. I'm joyful. I feel clear. I'm sleeping better. I'm setting a better
Mm-hmm.
example for my kids. We're far more connected. I have more conversations with my husband. Like nothing bad came from it.
Right.
Was I losing clients? I don't know. Maybe. But at the expense of what? Would I
Right.
rather have more clients, or would I rather have a family life that feels stable and good and connected? And
Mm-hmm.
that felt more important to me. So I kind of took this big leap of faith, especially with this cookbook that I wrote. And whatever else it might lead to, there's some things in the works, but I took a big leap of faith, and I'm like, you know what? I'm not using social media anymore. Um, I didn't completely, like, the apps are off my phone. I didn't completely get rid of it. It's one of those things where I've told myself, like, I don't have to use it as a pillar anymore. If I
Right.
want to put something up, I can, but I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to. And I think that there's more women and men too that I've had this conversation like it feels like hundreds of times. I don't know an exact number, obviously, but more people are looking for this.
Mm-hmm.
How can I build something successful without using social media?
Mm-hmm.
Email and a Google search are not dead.
Right. Oh, absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. If you can grow your email list, and if you can grow yourself, like case in point, maybe this is poor example, maybe not, but we just had our dog who used to be insane. We had him at a 3-week board and train. And I didn't find our trainer on social media. I went to Google. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know she had social media until a week in. She's like, "Hey, you can check out my highlight on Walter. Walter's our dog." And I was like, "Oh, I didn't even think about that." And maybe it's because I've been so out of that realm, but people are still using those types of tools.
Mm-hmm.
So where there's a will, there's a way, and I'm willing to fail and fumble as much as possible if it means that I can build something that is strong without using social media as a pillar. But also, if other people want to do the same, I'm willing to be the one that figures out the stuff through the messy if they want that too. And I know other entrepreneurs who are doing it. There's one that I just listened to a podcast, and of course I'm on here and I'm forgetting her name, but she's been off the social media for like 4 years and she has a very, very successful business actually. So I know it can be done.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Yeah. And it's not for everybody, and that's okay. But I know
Right.
that there is want.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's funny because not long ago, like a couple weeks ago, one of the guys that I used to work with when I worked in corporate sent me a message and he said, is blogging dead? Was what he said to me. And I was like, nope, not at
No.
all. Blogging is very much alive. SEO is very much a thing. In fact, right, like Instagram is starting to adopt that, right? Like, and I only know that because I hate using hashtags, right? So when I found that out, I was like, thank goodness, because I'm sick of driving myself nuts, right? And it was like
perfect hashtag. Yeah, it's
right?
exhausting.
Like I don't want to do that. I just want to write what I want to write. And and I was like, he's like, oh, so I could build a business on a blog. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. There are tons of people. There's tons of ways because that blog can then be turned into newsletters. It could be turned into a podcast, right? If you wanted to, you could turn it into social media posts. There's so many opportunities there. And he was like, oh,
yeah.
wow.
Yeah. I mean, and it's funny that you mentioned a blog because that is like one of the pieces that we're kind of behind the scenes because, as I've made this decision, my assistant and I are rebuilding out my website to include a blog and to include, workshops that are only available to my email list. So there's so many different things you can do that align with your passions, align with your values, align with your true north, align with your God-given talents, and then find your definition of success through those things. Like, even though blogs were like cool in like 1999, like they still are cool. Like I just read a blog for a recipe last night, so they're still accessible. So again, there's so many different reasons why I'm, here as I am right now without social media, with, writing cookbooks and doing these things. But it's all because I decided to put the time in and figure out like what is the point of all of this chaos and how can I use it, and really pray on how it's been given to me to remind myself who I am.
Right. Yeah. I mean, essentially you've created a very sustainable business plan for yourself. Right?
Yeah.
Like a plan of attack of like, I want this, I'm here. And how do I bridge that gap to get to where I want to go without X, Y, and Z. Right. And I think that, it's a very important thing. And I think you're really kind of paving the way for others to see that, oh, wow, I really don't need this, because it really doesn't, like, an engaged email list is so much more valuable than an engaged Instagram or Facebook, right? It doesn't really take that many engaged email followers to like create a sustainable income for you or to even create a change in your business.
It's true. Yeah. And I kind of worked on growing my email list like before my book was launched. It launched in October of 2022. And by the time it launched, I had a few hundred pre-orders just because I worked and I nurtured that email list. So I know, like, to a seasoned author, they're like 200, like that's not right.
That's a lot.
but for a self-published, semi-self-published, I did have help. First time author, like that's huge. So it all goes back to like how engaged is your email list. So, as I've been kind of navigating this, it's been a little clunky maybe the last couple of months. Like, what do I want to put out there? What do I want to share? I don't want it to always be like, buy my book, because that's annoying. So now like we've got some really good, like, value driven emails coming out the next couple months, but that's really like, where's the fun in it for you? And can you turn it into something valuable for other people?
Yeah. Yeah.
because if you can align those two things, like what's valuable for others and what's fun for me, that's where your sweet spot's going to be.
Absolutely. So what is one piece of information or one piece of advice? What is one piece of advice that you would tell your younger self?
Oh, I have like 20 pieces of advice, but let me think of like the most important thing. I think it really would go back to like, don't, it's hard to put into words. Don't be afraid of who God made you to be. Because I think that if I look back, like really digging in the files here, if I look back to like my teens and 20s and college and especially as a new mom when that insecurity is like just levels deep, I was very insecure in who I was. And I let other people determine what I should and shouldn't do. And I was really worried about appearances and all of that. But like none of that matters. If you're grounded in who you are, it's so much easier to live out what you're meant to live out. So that would probably be my best piece of advice for myself. And then also like I should probably tell my kids that. I think I do. I think I do in, many different ways, but like those words like, who are you? And don't be afraid of that. Don't be afraid of who God made you to be.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. All right. So my last question, it's so perfect for you. If you were a kitchen utensil or gadget, what would you be and why?
Ooh, let's see. What do I use the most? Huh. I would say like a stand mixer. So boring. But when I think about it though, stand mixer has a solid foundation. So all the work is kind of done for you. Like you just have these little attachments. It's kind of like a very well-oiled machine. So that solid foundation, yeah, stand mixer. I use it probably every day. It kind of mixes up, keeps things spicy, makes it interesting. And I feel like that's kind of what I'm doing right now, keeping things interesting.
That's awesome. I love that so much. Well, Nikki, thank you so much for being here on the podcast,
Thank you
for
so much
just
for
joining
having
me. It's
me.
been such a great conversation. So good to catch up with you.
Yeah,
So I'll
so good.
drop all your information below in the show notes. But
That'd be
go
great.
ahead and tell people how they can connect with you, where you're hanging out, right? What you're doing and all that
Yeah.
fun stuff.
Yeah. So my main place that I'm hanging out now would be my website. So it's nikkileeschneider.com and Maggie will link that so you don't have to like spell it out. But right now, that is just a website that houses my first cookbook called Sacred Table, Food Worth Gathering For, Volume 1. So the Volume 1 says something. There's more coming. But that is going to be the main place I hang out. Like I said, eventually there's going to be, and pretty soon, like next month, there'll be a blog. There'll be workshops. So if you want to sign up for my email list, that my email list always gets the best of me. So there'll be, like I said, workshops that only those people will get. And then you can also email me at hello@nikkileeschneider.com. I do have social media sites, but like I said, I don't, they're up. There's nothing there. They all drive back to the website. So that's where you can come hang out with me.
That's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being on today. It was so great to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. I appreciate you.
Wow, what a great interview. Thank you so much for showing up here on the Chaos to Clarity podcast. Again, my name is Maggie. I'm so excited to connect with you. You can find all of the information, all of the links below in the show notes for today's interview. And I hope you have the best day ever.